Good morning and welcome to today's budget hearings for the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We're so glad to be joined by Secretary of DCNR, Cindy Dunn, and our Acting Secretary of DEP, Jessica Shirley. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, do you have any open and introductory comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris, and good morning to Secretary Shirley, Secretary Dunn. We're happy to have both of you here today. Very important issues that we have to discuss related to DCNR and the DEP, and some pretty big chunks of the budget, which I want to highlight very quickly because this is a budget hearing. So for the DEP, in the governor's request, including the Environmental Hearing Board, we're looking at a total of about $262.6 million, or an increase of roughly about $27 million. And then for DCNR, we're looking at roughly in your general fund, a request from the governor's budget proposal of $198.5 million, or an increase of $23 million. But I think it's also important to put into context that both of your departments have a lot of other funds that contribute to your budgets, including federal funds. And that's why I think it's so important that, we ask some of the questions that we're going to ask today. But all told, together, both of your departments represent about $4.6 billion in federal, state, and other funds. So a lot to talk about today. I don't want to delay any further because we have important questions to ask. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, gentlemen. Secretary Dunn and Shirley, if you would please introduce the staff that you have with you today, and then we'll swear folks in and get started.
Oh, sure. Good morning. I am Jessica Shirley, the Acting Secretary for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. With me, I'm joined by Ramez Ziadeh, who is our Acting Executive Deputy Secretary. He has over 31 years of experience at DEP. And David Altoff, who is our Director of the State Energy Office, who has just over 32 years of experience with the department.
Hello, Cindy Adams-Dunn, Secretary of DCNR for 10 years, as I count it. With me is Deputy Secretary John Norbeck, Deputy Secretary of Parks and Forestry, with 40 years of natural resource management in both Maryland DNR and Pennsylvania DCNR as a past state park director and now Deputy of Parks and Forestry. Mike Walsh, our Deputy of Administration, who also leads our sustainability initiatives, again with Commonwealth employment in several agencies and with us over 10 years. And our newest Deputy Secretary, Dr. Claire Jantz from Shippensburg University, where she was the head of the Geography or Science Department and headed the Center for Sustainable Land Use. And Dr. Jantz has been with us now for a year as the Deputy of Conservation and Conservation and Technical Services. Thank you.
Thank you all. If you could all stand so we can swear everybody in and get started. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? Yeah. Thank you. You may be seated. In the middle of the table is our black box timer. When it is green, that means that our members will commence with their questions. They will have 5 minutes to ask questions. When that light turns yellow, that means they will have 30 seconds left, and they will not ask another question at the 30-second mark. They will not ask another question at the 30-second mark. Yep, I'm looking at you today, Ann Flood. I'm looking at you today. And then when the light turns red, they will wrap up their questions, and we will ask that you wrap up your answers so that we can get as many members in today with their questions. And with that in mind, we're going to start with Representative Friel.
Good morning. Good morning, Secretary Dunn, Secretary Shirley. Appreciate you guys coming here today. And with that, I'll jump.
Representative Friel, can you move the mic up, Rep? They can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
All right. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I have a few questions related to the Auditor General's report for DCNR. In February 2025, there was an audit related to the Community Conservation Partnership Program, and I understand the audit found that not all projects were competitively bid. Could you give us and explain that those findings to us a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the Auditor General and the staff's work. Audits are an important part of government funding. We have many audits that we are part of in DCNR and all agencies that are funded by public funds. The audit period was from July 1, 21 through June 30th, 23. We have a criteria in our grant manual. The grant manual becomes sort of the Bible of any grant round. And our grant manual contains a clause that allows us to make discretionary decisions at the executive level for a number of reasons, for innovative projects, for emergencies, meet special Commonwealth priorities and innovative opportunities. The audit found that just 3.9% of the grants that were made in that period of time used that discretionary authority for various reasons. If you look at the 30-year history of the C2P2 grant program, over 30 years, 8,400 projects in every county have been funded by that. 90% of people live in a municipality that had a grant-funded project, and Pennsylvanians live within a 10-minute walk of a grant-funded project. So we're a national leader in community grants. We have a system of local government where we have a lot of local government, so a grant program to assist municipalities in meeting their recreation needs is really essential. We're very proud of the program. It's very diligently run. We are gleaning from that ideas that we can take to constantly improve it. I think any grant program can see constant improvement. Since the audit period, we've gone to full electronic grant implementation. The front side of it was all electronic, now the back side, so we can produce reports more efficiently. And the Auditor General suggested that when we do make one of those discretionary decisions, we describe in more detail why that decision was made, and we certainly intend to do that.
I appreciate that. So that's, as I understand what you're saying, that was normal course of business for the last 30 years, and there was nothing unusual about what took place there. In that same audit report, DCNR accepted some late applications, one of which was accepted significantly late. Can you explain that late application?
Sure. As I mentioned, we've gone at the front end of the program. We call it e-grants, and it's led by it's supported by a computer system we call Racers. So the front end is now all electronic, and the first time a new applicant uses it, they may not be familiar. Yet on the back side, we can see all the data. So from the day of the deadline, we could see all the application from the applicant that you're talking about. But they were a first-time applicant. That grant round we pushed out using ARPA money, and the stated purpose was to reach communities of need, communities that perhaps hadn't had the opportunity to apply before, so they were unfamiliar, and they didn't hit the one last thing, which was the submit button. And in our audit, in our grant manual, it states clearly that at the discretion of the Bureau Director, we can accept a late application. And in the case of this community, the Bureau Director made that decision, and I would have certainly supported it had it been put in front of me. It's a decision I think anyone with some interest in supporting all Pennsylvanians would have made.
Well, thank you very much. And just a final question related to this is DCNR, in that same audit, found that there may have not complied with all the federal inspection requirements for land and water conservation fund projects.
That's correct.
Is that something you could also
Yeah,
highlight?
that's correct. And that was a finding. We were audited 10 years ago in the same program, and at that point, we were significantly behind in these 5-year inspections required by the federal funders. And actually, as a result of that audit, we did something really innovative that's become a model for inspectors everywhere. We outfitted our people with tablets. So you go to the site, take the picture, do the write-up on site, and that way you don't have the inefficiency of like going back to the office and realizing, oh, you forgot to take a picture of the blank, you know? So we greatly improved our inspection. We were behind in inspections this audit, 2 reasons. Number one, there was a big clerical error, which we explained to the auditors. It was one of those fiscal year issues. State fiscal year, federal fiscal year was different. We corrected it as soon as it was pointed out to us. So that was 45 of the late ones. And then the other ones were due to a staff vacancy that happened right in the heart of COVID. And I'd really ask anyone to challenge themselves not to think of something that came a little behind during COVID. Yet despite this, we're held up as a model by the National Park Service, and we're asked to lecture on our work on LWCF implementation. We are designated to implement for the federal government, so we're actually held up as a model. And we had never received a complaint or, from the National Park Service, who's a source of the funds for LWCF. So we feel, number one, we do a very good job. We're proud of it. Number two, we always look for improvement, and we'll certainly take the Auditor General's recommendations to heart and look for constant improvement.
Thank you, and for the record, I did stay within my budgeted time. Thanks, sir.
Thank the gentleman. Representative DeVanzo.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and thank you all for being here this morning. My question is for Secretary Shirley. Secretary Shirley, Pennsylvania has a huge pocket of natural gas that we sit on. Given a considerable competitive edge, we would have a competitive edge over, few states have. What more can the Energy Office and the administration do to help attract businesses and industries?
Thank you for that question. You can hear me, right?
Now, can you move it closer to you?
A little closer?
Yeah.
I'm also struggling with a little bit of a sickness. So thank you for that question. I think it falls squarely within something that the governor recently announced related to his lightning plan. And there's a number of different programs laid out in that lightning plan, but one of them is the Reset Board, which would assist developers from being able to cite different projects, energy projects here in Pennsylvania. You are absolutely correct that we sit on a wealth of natural gas beneath our feet. The department permits those wells as they come in, but as far as incentives go, I think the price of natural gas is a pretty good incentive right now for development of that resource.
Right, thank you. Do you think the governor's push to enter Pennsylvania into RGGI or PACER or whatever the new agreement is now, doesn't that go against what you just said? Because even though the governor is on one side is saying, hey, we want to welcome, but on the other side, we're going to hit everybody with a tax and we're going to drive up energy costs. I mean, we've probably lost 5 or 6 power plants out west. New construction, millions of dollars. We've lost older coal-fired natural gas power plants that are offline. Just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so the rulemaking that you've been talking about, the program, it's not in effect, has never been in effect right now. It's sitting with the state Supreme Court. It's a cap and trade program, a cap and invest program, which is something that we've seen all across the country. But what I would add, when you look at the PJM, not just in Pennsylvania, but PJM, the whole span, all 13 states, there is only one natural gas-fired power plant that is proposed. So I don't know that this is necessarily a Pennsylvania problem so much as it is a regional issue that we're seeing.
So if I was a developer, energy guy, and I wanted to build a power plant, and Pennsylvania's into RGGI, I know it's not enacted yet, but the governor will not drop this, and Ohio has a sign that says, we are open for business, we are welcome for business, where would you go?
Well, they're not building in Ohio either, is my point.
I'm just saying, though, they're not building it here either, though.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
And I think that's
and it's because of our poor policy. I want to shift a little bit. Is there any way that we could work with some of our natural gas, hydrogen into our public transportation fleets, whether it's school buses, public transportation? We hear that's both of our public transportation systems struggling a little bit. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm going to ask Dave Altoff, who is our director of the Energy Office. He has a ton of experience. We have very successful programs at DEP using alternative fuels specifically for transportation, but he can touch on more of all of the various programs and things that we're doing.
Sure, thank you for that question. As Secretary Shirley said, we've been running the Alternative Fuels Incentive Grant Program since the mid-90s. It's one of the pieces of revenue that comes into the Energy Office based upon a millage from the Utilities Gross Receipts Tax, 1/4 mil. We get about $5 million a year, and we offer that out for competitive grants 2 times a year to businesses, industry, local government, schools, to deploy all manner of alternative fuel vehicle technologies from natural gas to propane to electric to, innovative technology projects as well. So we are well oversubscribed in that program. We award at least $4 to $5 million each year, plus also run a residential rebate program for alternative fuel vehicles. So we're all the time out promoting that program. We're oversubscribed in that program, and we are looking to lean in, report out. We provide a report annually to the legislature on our accomplishments with regards to the AFIG program. So we're all in on alternative fuel transportation because we know that is one of our 3 key sectors in Pennsylvania whereby we have the most emissions.
All right, I see the yellow lights up, and due to respect to time, I just want to finish with this. Pennsylvania's sitting on this huge pocket of natural gas. We should be using it, putting it to work. Those are Pennsylvania jobs, Pennsylvania energy, Pennsylvania economy. I'm not so fond on bringing electric vehicles, batteries online. That's all child labor overseas. We should be doing a better job here in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning and welcome to the secretaries. My question is for DEP. Just last week, there was a significant fire at the grounds of the SPS Technologies Corporation in Abington Township, Montgomery County. Would you tell us what DEP's involvement was in that incredible emergency response that occurred there, resulting in no injuries to any of the factory workers or nearby residents?
Sure, thank you for that question. We regularly respond to environmental emergencies all across Pennsylvania. SPS fire is a very visible one, and when we got the call from local emergency management, who was the first responders on the scene, we were there almost immediately as soon as we could get there. So when we go to the site of a large fire like that, particularly one that has chemicals that SPS had, we have 2 main priorities, and that is making sure that those chemicals and any runoff from the fire don't enter any waterways, either through a stormwater system or directly by running into a stream, and we monitor air quality. So we called in EPA. They have some air quality monitors that they can deploy. They deployed those very shortly after the fire started. And we began monitoring the water of the Tucany Creek and at the confluence of the Delaware River. So during the entire time of the fire, and we continue to monitor just to make sure that there aren't additional potential impacts from any type of runoff. So we tested for VOCs, and we tested for, what else did we test? Cyanide, excuse just blanked out. VOCs and cyanide, and we did notice some benzene in the Tucany, but by the time that it got to the confluence with the Delaware, it had essentially dissipated. There was no threat to drinking water. There aren't any drinking water facilities on the Tucany. The closest one is on the Delaware, and it is upstream from the confluence, but we did notify them just to be aware and make sure that they took some additional precautions. But we do this, every day all across the state.
And we thank you sincerely for those fast-acting efforts. Can you talk about what the continued time frame is for monitoring and what you'll be looking for and keeping an eye on there?
We will continue to monitor the creeks to make sure that there's no impact. So that's an ongoing operation right now. Once we confirm that there are no impacts to the water, then we can decide at that point that, when we can stop that monitoring activity.
It would be through the cleanup.
Great. And does DEP do any monitoring of I know you said that the water source is not the Tucany Creek for, the surrounding area of the plant, but would you do any monitoring of drinking water in that area just to continue the extra precaution?
Yep, that's ongoing. So we are working with the Philadelphia Water Department on that monitoring effort to ensure that the drinking water is safe, and it is safe as of now.
Great. And then could you comment on any of the previous involvement with DEP and the facility? Had there been any interactions prior to the incident?
Yes, there are a number of permits that SPS holds with the department, which means that we do regular inspections as well. So I'll go through, I have a list here. We have they have clean water permits, they have air quality permits, and they have waste permits, and safe drinking water permits because they provide water to the folks that work there. They have a synthetic miner. We did a full compliance inspection of air quality last December, not 2024, but 2023. Inspections for that size of facility are done about every 5 years. On the clean water side, we inspected July 24th, 2023. There were no violations from clean water. They did fail to pay fees associated with their permit, so we're working with them on that, but that's an administrative violation. They also have several violations on their drinking water side, mostly related to failure to pay fees, and they did not, at one point, they failed to take a sample because they didn't have access because of an ongoing rail project nearby. That was remedied with them. And same thing on the waste side. We conducted routine inspections on July 24th, 2023 and August 7th, 2024. And there were some small container violations that were corrected within follow-up timelines.
Okay, thank you. I see my time's expired, and I may follow up with some additional questions on those, and apologize for going over the time. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentleman. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Shirley, I'd like to revisit some issues that I think you're addressing and that were in your proposal previously as it relates to permitting improvements. I come from Lawrence County. We continue to lose business to Ohio as it's 10 minutes away and very easy for people to locate there, and their processes and permitting is still a lot easier. Given your work with the e-permitting and the 40 additional positions that you requested previously, in the current fiscal year, you began with a reported $21 million technology upgrade for your IT infrastructure. Can you give us an update on where you're at with that?
Sure. Thank you for this question. So over the last year, we have been engaged in a number of permitting efforts that would take probably the entirety of the time we have this morning to outline. But for the specific IT infrastructure, we've been working with Code PA, which is a piece of the Governor's Office of Administration specifically around IT and user experience to develop the permitting, licensing, and certification platform. Last year, I would say late spring, early summer, we issued an RFP. We have selected a platform, and that platform is Salesforce, who will be helping, or they'll be the platform for the main system. Right now, we are in the process of going through our second RFP to bring integrators into the department that will help us customize that system with our various programs and permits. And we expect probably late summer we should have something to roll out. Probably not for every program that we have and every permit that we have, but we will be able to roll it out for some of our smaller programs.
So then what would be the full length of rollout we'd be looking at before we're actually seeing a difference in timeframes?
For the system will help with timeframes, but it's kind of a small piece of permitting timeframes. We have a number of initiatives underway looking at our processes that are helping to shrink our processing timelines.
Would that be the speed process?
No. So there's a couple things. So we have speed, which you've identified. That is a third-party review But we also have a number of pilot programs that we're working with several county conservation districts on that shorten the time frame of permits. One of them is in 102, and then we have, which is erosion and sediment control or earth moving, and then we have a statewide Chapter 105 pilot program, and that's for waterways and wetlands, so stream crossings and encroachments. So, like I said, there's a number of things going on right now, trying to speed up the permitting process or create efficiencies in those review processes. The program is a piece of that.
And I assume you have a work plan on how to implement these and improve efficiencies sooner?
Yeah, so that's what we're working through right now. We have updated all of our standard operating procedures, many of which had not been updated since 2012. That's for consistency, but there's also additional programs that we're in pilot projects that we're working on right now to kind of test some of our theories about ways that we might be able to achieve efficiencies.
That's great to hear. And as the governor claims he wants to be more competitive with other states, how do these upgrades, do you think, compare in terms of meeting or exceeding technological updates or resources, I guess, that the public and private entities have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we are designing this, we're really thinking about the user experience. And one of the things that we've been able to update immediately, in January, we rolled out the permit tracker. So that is all permits. This was part of the SPEED Act that you folks helped to pass last year. And that is applicants can go in, the community members can go in, any interested party can go into that system and find out exactly where their permit is in the process. They'll be able to see if the department has received it, if maybe it's been sent back to a consultant to address technical deficiencies. And they'll also see the anticipated timeline or due date of that permit because of the payback program that we've also been implementing since last November.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to your continued progress with these projects. Thanks so much.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling with the technology here for a minute. Good morning, Secretaries. I always want to say thank you for being here, and especially to your team, because I want to recognize the amount of efforts required to be ready just for the budget, but also to speak to it as you all have today. And really want to recognize that. For my part, I'm going to talk about a lot of local issues. So I represent a district on the Perkiomen watershed. It includes Evansburg State Park, and it's about a mile from the Schuylkill River, the confluence of the Perky and the Schuylkill River. So let's start with our heritage areas. And so, Secretary Dunn, if you could, just recognizing that we finally, after 20 years, provided a little extra funding last year. What's been the impact of that extra funding?
Our 12 heritage areas, 12 state heritage areas, 6 of them, like yours, Schuylkill River Heritage being national as well, have a tremendous economic, environmental, and conservation engagement impact in the community. They are our highest in terms of, we look at the dollars raised to match our dollars, they garner the highest match of any of our partner grantees because of their deep and rich connection in the community and their locally directed boards. And they're also key for preparing Pennsylvania for America 250 PA, the semi-quincentennial, if I said it right. In the Schuylkill Heritage area is particularly important when you think about the history that happened on the Schuylkill with George Washington and all the history there, and where Philadelphia will play a major role. And the Schuylkill Heritage tells a story of the environmental revolution, the national revolution, and the recreational revolution. They've been leaders themselves and models in recreation. We know there's an explosive interest in outdoor recreation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the Schuylkill Heritage area has really jumped onto that in a big way. They have a great site there in Pottstown right along the Schuylkill, on the Schuylkill River Trail. And from there, they're introducing people maybe for the first time who have a chance to get on a bike or jump in a canoe. Yep. and experience the Schuylkill.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we're going to be short on time, and I've got a couple to.
Oh, sorry.
You know,
No,
so I think that's
my mind has gone to paddling.
Yeah, you
the
bet.
Schuylkill.
And the
Sorry.
success
I'll
story.
go back to earth here.
My second question is not so successful. So Evansburg State Park, for the 10 years I've lived in that area, they've never opened a visitor center, and you obviously have a large capital backlog. Let's talk about what do we need to do? How do we help recreate these parks to be successful?
I appreciate that, and I'll try to be more succinct. I might need to turn to John Norbeck for some details in Evansburg. As you know, Governor Shapiro 2 years ago granted us $112 million extra dollars to work on this backlog of park and forest infrastructure. And the good news is we're getting around to it. We are improving facilities, we're improving visitor experience. Some of it's invisible, some of it's water lines and sewer lines, some of it's visible in improving the visitor experience. So we do have a long list. Good news is when we do get to a project, it's great for the economy, both the local contractors who get the jobs, plus the elevation of the economy. We'll take a look at Evansburg and see what we can do, but I'll ask John if he knows the specifics.
Sure. I honestly do not know where that specific project is on our list of projects. I will say that our facility design and construction group, which is our construction and engineering group within DCNR, they have $388 million worth of projects that they are working on currently. And we're allowed to do that.
If I could impact that, I'd be pushing, Evansburg up the list.
And I will look to see where Evansburg is on the list and get that information back.
I appreciate that.
But the point is, we're working on that. We appreciate the support from the legislature, like the Secretary said.
We need to help you get going on those. So my important part, Assistant Secretary Shirley, you know this is coming, right? Our colleague, Leader Bradford, calls it my war on the Perkiomen. It's my war for the Perkiomen. And that is that we are trying to model the hydrology and the impact of the current level of rainfall with the current level of development that impacts our creek. And I think generally I would ask you to, spend the rest of the time that I have this morning and talk about the impact of flooding and why it's so important to invest in a little bit of infrastructure. This is infrastructure that's going to protect hundreds of millions of dollars of property.
I'll talk fast. So what you've highlighted, I think, is a challenge all across Pennsylvania, not just in the Perkiomen watershed, but there are watersheds where it is more heightened, and I think the Perkiomen is one of them. We are seeing, thanks to changing weather patterns, more increased localized flooding events because of quick precipitation downfall in a short period of time. And in places like in eastern Pennsylvania, where there is a lot of development, stormwater management is incredibly important.
Yeah, we're going to lose it, because Chairman, I apologize for the late question. Simply resolving how important it is, and I thank you. For those who don't know, Acting Secretary Shirley spent a day with us on the Perkiomen, and we're excited about the potential of this project, and I apologize for not giving you the time to answer that question. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
No, Representative Flood, I'm now looking at Representative Webster.
That's right, that's right.
Thank the gentleman. We know your passion for the Perkiomen. We get it. Representative Flood.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Shirley, Secretary Dunn, thank you so much for being here today. As you know, PFAS is a forever chemical that's widespread in our environment, and you find it in things through nonstick cookware, firefighting foam, water-resistant clothing, and it is known to cause some severe critical health issues, cancers, reproductive issues, thyroid, liver disease, and weakened immune system. And PFAS is something that remains in our soil for decades and, potentially even centuries. The contamination of the water supplies have brought significant attention to this issue, and everybody deserves to have clean and safe drinking water. So Secretary Shirley, What is the status of the current year funding of the $1.5 million to expand PFAS water testing capacity within your agency?
So last year, this body appropriated additional funding to DEP's lab to increase our testing capacity, and we are incredibly grateful of that. We have been able to buy the equipment, and we are in the process of filling those positions that came along with that equipment, which was in response to our MCL rulemaking that went into effect last year.
Is this additional funding going to leverage or match existing federal funds as part of a larger long-term water quality management and testing strategy?
So that testing was not associated with anything from the federal level, but since the time we made the ask, the EPA did finalize their drinking water MCL. We have one that is, like I said, it went into effect last year, the maximum contaminant level. EPA's will go into effect a few years from now and is a little bit more stringent than ours.
Thank you. Well, last year we spoke on this issue, and for an issue that's going on in my district in Northampton County. And I was told that there were going to be some new regulations rolling out in the fall, new guidelines. And then when I reached out to your office in the fall, I was advised that you're waiting for more guidelines and regulations coming down from the EPA.
Can I ask, is it related to the biosolids?
Biosolids. Yeah, I was just getting to that, yeah. Because it's becoming more of an issue with the soil and wastewater management issues. So, and that's what it is. I have a sewer authority that is purchased a farm that is spreading their biosolids on their land. And so the residents around that land are concerned about the contamination of the water. And so there's new guidelines that we are being told are supposed to be coming down from DEP. You're waiting for EPA. Can you just kind of update us to where we are with that, please?
Sure. So EPA issued their biosolids risk assessment for PFAS, which is like a scientific document, just late last year. So we're in the process of evaluating that, and one of the things that we're working on now is assembling a team of scientists and academia to go through the entirety of the biosolids issue. There's PFAS issues, there's heavy metals, there's pharmaceuticals, there's a lot of things that we don't have answers to. PFAS is one that, thanks to the EPA's research and the assessment that they put together, we are able to use that as a guide to guide our permits that have been administratively extended.
So with these appropriated funds that you have gotten, is any of this available for testing for any of the soil testing and things like that?
So soil testing, we do soil testing. It's actually done through another program, our environmental cleanup and brownfields program. So when we discover PFAS, which it tends to come, we find it in the water, immediately it kicks off an investigation to determine where the PFAS is coming from. And that is the environmental cleanup side of the house. So we have over 70 investigations going on right now that do involve testing soil, testing groundwater, all kinds of monitoring to determine the source of the PFAS that's then getting into the water.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I'm almost out of time. I'll give it back.
You got it. Good job. Thank the gentlelady, Representative Khan.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Thank you, Secretary Shirley. How are you? Secretary Dunn, good to see you. Thank you to both of you and also for both of your agencies for all of your work. First question is for Secretary Shirley. First of all, thank you for all the work that you all did around the fire at SPS Technologies in Jenkintown. That's where my parents, right around that area, I take the Tookoonee Creek Parkway home when I visit them. And I appreciate it. It comes to mind a lot of other major incidents where the public health may be at risk. It looks like it was in Jenkintown, but with the Clarion Coke Works, going back to Philadelphia Energy Solutions, where you have a catastrophe and the public's health is potentially at risk. I have two questions around that. The first one is, are we doing enough to make sure that the offenders who are responsible for it are alerting the public about potential health problems in a timely manner? And also, are penalties for these offenders, are they sufficient?
So on the penalties, which I think is one of the easier answers, the department, we usually issue the top, whatever the highest amount of penalty is. It really depends on the law. It really depends on the violation. So speaking broadly, you know, I think there are some that we would probably like to see increased and some that we think are sufficient. As far as health impacts and companies notifying residents, if there is an emergency, if there is an event, usually local responders will work with PEMA, who then calls in, you know, DEP or the Department of Health when necessary, and then we try to have a real coordinated effort to communicate with the public through those channels. So sometimes the company, they might have that information, the best they know what's in their facility. A lot of times we know what's in that facility as well. You know, with SPS, there was a determination of, you know, where is the fire? It was a very large facility. Were there chemicals there? What chemicals were there? And then, you know, we try to work with local law enforcement, or the local responders, you know, PEMA, the Department of Health, to communicate out anything that would be necessary.
Thank you. Thank you. Secretary Dunn, again, thank you for the work that you all do. So I'm a nurse practitioner, and mental health is very important to me. And we, unfortunately, sort of in the wake of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot more incidents of all sort of mental health issues, suicides being one of them. I think in 2022 and 2023, our nation has seen the highest rates of suicides since before World War II. And unfortunately, and it's about 50,000 people committing suicide. In parks, actually, it's not the leading cause of death in our parks and forests, but it's up there. I think it's in the top 5, people going to parks or forests and deciding to take their own life. And so I'm wondering about, we're very blessed to have this 988 system where people can call to get help when they're having a crisis. And wanted to know about, in terms of posting in our state parks and forests, if it's something that you all are able to do, or would you prefer to come through legislation for us to increase, to make sure that all parks and forests are alerting people about 988, so in case they're there and they have an emergency, they're being aware?
Oh, thank you for the question, and it's one of the saddest things that can happen in Pennsylvania, or especially in our parks or in our forests. It's something that is difficult for our staff, as you can imagine, and you know, sad all around. We have posted signs. I think coming out of this hearing last year, we heard some input and we reflected on it, and we have signs up. I have to be honest, a lot of the intent for suicide is clear from notes left at home that the person's going to come and going to complete a suicide. And so I think going upstream from that, thinking about mental health, we all know, and there's more and more studies showing how time outdoors can really help mental health. So we've known for a long time its impact on physical health, but even just time sitting in a park or walking in a park can really help people. So we're hoping to engage with more people coming and visiting natural spaces, visiting forests, visiting parks, whether they're state parks or local parks, can actually help in the preventative side. And we'll certainly work with other agencies and anything we can do to help reduce the number of suicides in Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm working on a bipartisan bill with Marcel about that, fellow committee member. Thank you. We would appreciate anything you can do on that.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Alsumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Dunn
Thank you.
and Secretary Shirley, and both your teams for being here today. I'm looking forward to the opportunity of hearing what you all have to say. I'm a newer member to the House. I'm from the 139th District, from Wayne and Pike County, and I want to talk about a problem that I've heard many times in my district and from colleagues across the Commonwealth. I think we can all agree our children are our most important resource. Daycare centers in our rural area and across the Commonwealth are facing significant regulations with respects to drinking water, serving over 25 people, open to the public. In my rural district, there's not a lot of public water systems, but we do have exceptional water quality. Keep in mind, many of these children live in homes on well systems. These regulations are impacting our daycare centers, our families, and our businesses. I'm asking on behalf of our families, our businesses, our daycare centers, and most importantly, our children. Madam Secretary, Secretary Shirley, can you find a common sense solution to this ongoing issue?
Are you referring to a specific safe drinking water regulation or just that daycare facilities are regulated?
No, it's specifically to the Safe Water Drinking, Pennsylvania Safe Water Drinking Act, I believe. And what it does affect is when a daycare center goes beyond 25 persons, there's a requirement that they either meet a public drinking water standard, or there's new well system that goes in with ongoing testing, creating significant expenses, and the testing creating significant ongoing expenses as well that many of them in our area can't meet. And quite honestly, being from a high quality area in a rural area in our region is a significant concern.
So I think I understand the question. You know, safe drinking water, we oversee anyone who's considered a public water system. And there's different designations for where you fall within, you know, the very large, like, you know, Philadelphia Water Department, to very small, which would be restaurants, daycare facilities, schools, that type of thing. For us,
Madam Secretary, if I could just interrupt for 1 second there. And I guess to that point, what I'm asking is a common sense approach to that end in our region on a case-by-case considered basis for these struggling daycares, businesses, and families.
I think given the governor's priority around daycares, we can take a look if there is assistance specifically for daycares. I have a child, two of them. One of them is a 3-year-old. She goes to daycare right across the street. And as a parent, I personally want to know that whatever water that's being provided to my child is safe. And just because they have a well and there might be, you know, exceptional value waters around the area doesn't necessarily mean that the well has been constructed in a way that prevents E. coli and other things from getting into the well. So I think it is critical that we do have some sort of testing parameters, but you do raise a very good point that there is a childcare shortage in Pennsylvania. We have been working specifically with childcare facilities to test for lead that they might have in their facility, in their piping, but there might be some other engagement that we can do specifically around daycare facilities through that channel that we have specifically working on lead to see if there are other compliance assistance opportunities that we can offer.
Okay, all I would ask is that in our region, at the very least, that you would consider that on a case-by-case basis. And I completely understand the need to protect our children from contaminants And I believe so do our daycare center owners as well, and the families. So thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Waxman.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much all for being here. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Chairman. I really want to focus my questions to DEP. On February 13th, the Governor of Pennsylvania, as well as DEP and other agencies and departments, filed a lawsuit to unfreeze federal funding that had been frozen by the Trump administration. That was ultimately resolved, I believe, on the 24th, with all the federal funds being unfrozen. I'd like to know a little bit about what happened at the agency that led up to the lawsuit being required to be filed.
So a lot of the federal funds that the department is receiving are related to...
I just want to, I'm sorry, my light is already red, and I just want to make sure that we're staying on time. All right.
we got you. We got you.
I was getting some free time there, maybe. I shouldn't have. Anyway, I'm sorry. Please.
We're receiving funding related to oil and gas well plugging, related to abandoned mine, land reclamation, and in order to be able to reimburse our project partners, who are oftentimes Pennsylvania small businesses, we have to be able to submit reimbursements and draw down funds. We did not have access to the system to be able to draw down funds, so it looked as if it was closed.
How did you learn that you didn't have access?
I believe the comptroller's office went in and looked to see if we had access.
Someone at the state level?
Yes.
Was there any communication at that time from the federal government that they had cut off access to this system?
There was no communication from the federal government.
So then what happened? I'm sorry, I just wanted to...
Yeah, so, we, worked through the governor's budget office, the governor's legal team, and they determined to file. So we just provided supporting information for that.
Had there been any communication from the new administration, from the federal government, beyond when the access was cut off that you described? Had there been any conversations up to that point saying this might be something that's happening, that this might be cut off? Was there any assessment that was done of any of the programs, any of the things that were cut off? Was there anything done by the federal government to just gauge the impact and find out what would happen as a result of cutting off the funds?
Not that I'm aware of.
So no engagement with your department and the federal government at all, basically, until the day that we just couldn't make the payments?
That's correct.
Okay. So the lawsuit is filed. Does anything change, or do things remain the same way until things are resolved about roughly 10 days later?
So we continued talking with our project partners and told them to operate as normal, and that projects should continue. Some of those project partners decided to ramp down some of their activities, but not at the direction of the department. We told them to continue working on their projects, to continue, the progress that they were making, but some of them said, we can't continue to do this work if we're not going to get paid for it. So some of them did scale down some operations.
So just the uncertainty of those 10 days, of that amount of federal funding being cut off, being frozen, it had immediate, lasting impacts that are going to result in less of what was supposed to be happening and what was funded and what was needed in the Commonwealth.
I don't know that there's lasting impacts other than the uncertainty. There might be, I could only guess, but there might be project partners who, or potential project partners who might decide not to do a project if they aren't guaranteed to have the reimbursement.
I noticed that OMB was a party of the lawsuit, one of the agencies at the federal level that was sued. Has there been any communication now that the funding is unfrozen again? Has there been any communication with OMB? Has there been any communication with federal government about what they plan next, or what they're doing?
Yeah, that's probably a question for the budget secretary. I'm not involved in those conversations.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and that concludes my questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Shirley, Secretary, I appreciate you all being here today. Secretary Shirley, my questions are directed towards you. Could you explain the citizens' rulemaking process and how many petitions are currently being considered at DEP at this point?
Number of petitions, I'm not sure. We could get that for you. But we do at the rulemaking body for the department is the Environmental Quality Board. It's a 20-member board made up of various agencies and some members of the legislature, some of them who are in this room. Anyone can petition the department or the EQB for a rulemaking. That if they have scientific data and various information. Typically, we see this.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, our time is limited. If I might ask a follow-up question, there are 3 particular petitions that I'd like to ask you about today. One deals with bonding in the natural gas industry. One deals with a setback rule of 1 kilometer, I believe, and then one deals with a cap and trade program as well. As you consider these rules, are you considering the financial impact that these rules would have on the Commonwealth?
So that is part of the evaluation. So what happens is they petition the department or the Environmental Quality Board. If it meets specific criteria, we accept the petition for further study. Part of that further study does have to do with financial implications, anything that would have to go through the rulemaking process. So there are questions as part of the rulemaking process from ERC on what's called a regulatory analysis form. A lot of it has to do with small business impacts. So those are considerations that we would have to do to determine whether or not we take that back to the EQB with a recommendation, and we say we recommend that we move forward with the rulemaking, which is what happened in the PFAS MCL, or we say we recommend that this petition be rejected on these grounds,
and it's your
then
petition.
The EQB makes the decision.
Yeah, and it's your position that these rules could be implemented without any legislative consent whatsoever.
So that is part of the evaluation. So if you look at the department's petition policy, as long as it meets 3, I would say, very broad criteria, we accept it for further evaluation. That does not mean that it's moving forward with a rulemaking. There's a very long process with a petition, but what it means is that we're going to take it and evaluate it and make those determinations of whether we have that authority.
And anybody can file a petition.
Yeah,
entities from out of state could file a petition.
Sure.
An NGO that's getting funded by USAID could file a petition.
Yes, so typically we see these for stream redesignations. That's what it historically has been, are for stream redesignations. But recently, I would say over the last 2 years, we have seen different types of petitions come in for evaluation.
Could you quantify, and if you don't have it off the top of your head, I'd like to know it, the number of man hours that DEP is spending on these types of petitions and how much time and money is being wasted reviewing and going over these types of petitions?
We could probably, it really depends on the petition and the evaluation. Some of them, we can look at pretty quickly and say we don't have the authority to do this, and then there isn't a ton of time spent, but then some of them does require modeling and analysis and things like that. So we might be able to do that on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, if you could get that back to us, I'd be really curious. It's concerning to me that huge decisions, these petitions could quite frankly eliminate tire industries in the Commonwealth if they were to be implemented. Billions and billions and billions of dollars of investment, over 100,000 jobs are on the line, and there's absolutely no legislative input in this process. I think it's outrageous that it's even a process that we should consider.
There would be legislative input as part of the typical rulemaking process. So the petition, just the act of petitioning, does not make it go into effect. The petition process is an evaluation process. Any regulation would still have to follow the regulatory process.
So we would have to approve this regulation, this rule that would go into effect?
There's no approval, but ERC would have to approve it.
Where's the legislative process? Where's the legislative consent in this process?
There's a number of, within the regulatory process, there's a number of touch points for legislative members. Obviously, public comment periods, but there is a process of review.
No vote on the floor, no rule
There could
or
be.
law?
That's on the legislature. If the legislature wants to take a vote, they can do that.
Yeah, of course, we could take the vote to revoke, but we don't have a voice in the process. You could allegedly implement it without us being involved.
Yeah, within the rulemaking process, though, there are touch points for the legislature if the legislature, and this is not just in petitions, this is any rulemaking that the department does or any agency does. There is a legislative review process for rulemakings. And we have had votes by this body against regulations.
No, I've been a part of them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Kincaid.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Pennsylvania has one of the highest rates of landslides in the nation. A report just acknowledged that Pennsylvania is also among the highest in rates of sinkholes. On Tuesday, an SUV was swallowed whole by a sinkhole in Philadelphia, and water service was cut off to several households. What does the Department of Environmental Protection do to help individuals impacted by landslides and sinkholes?
I would say it probably depends on why there is a sinkhole. So sinkholes can happen for a number of reasons. Some of it is underlying geology. Some of it is related to leaks from infrastructure. Some of it is related to abandoned mines, like we saw in Westmoreland County. So it really depends on the situation to how we respond and what the cause is for how we respond.
Do you provide any insurance to help people recover from the financial loss related to landslides and sinkholes that are not related to mine subsidence?
We do not.
Yep. I want to talk about well plugging. Can you talk about the process for mapping the wells and describe the criteria that you use to prioritize which wells are plugged first?
So typically, well, we haven't had funding up until the federal dollars that were appropriated by the IIJA. It was very limited, and it was based on emergency situations. So the tiers of emergency were threats to public health was the first tier, threats to environmental protection was the second tier, and then everything kind of after that was, down below. With the funding, the initial $25 million that we received as part of the initial grant, we looked at those highest priority wells that we had on our list, and then we basically drew a radius around where those highest priorities were and tried to maximize.
How are the highest priorities determined?
It would be our evaluation.
Based on how much they're leaking, based on their accessibility?
It would be all of those things. If it was leaking into someone's house, if it was leaking into someone's water well. We've had them where they've been under people's driveways. Really just, it would be our judgment how we determine.
So in the case of wells in places like the Allegheny Forest that are no longer road accessible, how's the department planning to address plugging those wells?
In the ANF? Specifically, we're working with the National Parks and Forests, or I forget what's the federal? Allegheny. Okay, so we're working with Allegheny National Forest. And there's a separate pot of funding provided by the federal government to plug those wells. That's not part of Pennsylvania's pot of money.
Okay. And how many orphan wells does the department believe will be plugged using the additional appropriated funds?
I think our estimates are somewhere, we should receive, if we receive everything, about $300 million, so at least 3,000.
And what's the timeline for that?
So the funding, I believe DOI just recently changed that they're kind of front-loading some of the funding for us. We received $78 million this year. We'll probably get another 100 and some million next year, and then the following year. And then we have, I believe, 5 years after we receive that final allotment to complete the work. So we're looking at potentially 7 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Krupa.
Welcome. Thank you to all the testifiers for being here today. I do want to apologize in advance if I cut you off. It's a little absurd to me that these two appropriations hearings are being done at the same time, given the DEP has an almost $33 million budget proposal, and DCNR has an almost $36 million budget proposal. That being said, I'm going to start with Secretary Dunn. Specifically regarding the findings of the performance audit report released on February 13th, 2025 by the Auditor General DeFore. The Auditor General stated that this is very concerning, in speaking of his findings, this is very concerning because DCNR's executive management opened the door to outside pressure and influence in awarding state grants by not solely relying on the advertised process. When management can make its own rules, it diminishes the integrity of a grant program. Specifically looking at that letter, the audit found that DCNR did not award all C2P2 grants competitively, and that it failed to adequately oversee post-completion site inspections and inspection documentation and reporting. There's 120 days from the date of this letter for you to decide whether or not you're going to accept all the recommendations or you're not. Have you had an opportunity to decide which recommendations are going to be adopted, and if any are not, why not?
Okay, I appreciate the question, I think. But anyway, we're reviewing the findings, and we take all the recommendations very seriously. And as I mentioned up top, we very clearly state in our grant manual that we have 4 conditions by which we will vary from the rankings of the civil servant staff. And they include emergency situations, unique opportunities, innovative opportunities, and if they meet special Commonwealth priorities. And I will add, we appreciate the letters from the members of this body we get about the grants, and the rankings of the staff are really what count, but sometimes we do get input from a legislator that makes us aware of something, like I can think of one. It wasn't caught up in the audit, but there's one I remember weighing in on a park that was bicentennial.
Forgive me, because we're almost at the 2.5-minute mark.
Okay,
can
sorry.
you address
Yes.
can you address specifically whether you've made a decision on whether you're adopting all of the recommendations?
We don't agree with all the findings. We don't agree with all the language. We spell that out. If you scroll down through, the Auditor General kindly does put our response in with their recommendations, but we'll take every single suggestion very seriously and continue to improve our process.
As much as I'd love to do a deep dive in that, I'm going to move to the DEP. And specifically regarding the SPEED program, does the SPEED program address general permits?
It does.
It does.
Specifically for Chapter 105, Chapter 102.
So I've heard from...
Sorry, just 102.
Just 102, not 105?
No, not 105.
Okay, so, and that has been an issue that's been brought to me by friends, by constituents in neighboring districts, specifically regarding the inefficient process that, with the, so it's the General Permit 1, Fish Habitat Enhancement. That review is by 4 agencies, right? Fish and Boat Commission, the County Conservation District, DEP, and Army Corps of Engineer. I'm hearing that it's 60 to 180 days to get a response. Another example would be your agricultural crossings. And one of the complaints that I heard is, and I come from a farming family, I support our farmers, there's only so many different possible crossings that a farmer's going to do to cross a small stream on their property. Why, instead of this complicated permit application process with these unnecessary delays, why are there not just plans that the applicant can choose from? They pay their fee, they commence the operations, and obviously the DEP and these other agencies are going to have the ability to come in and inspect. So there seems to be obvious inefficiencies with this program, unnecessary delay. Is that on your radar? Is that within your budget? What are you doing to fix that problem?
Thank you for that question. We recently improved the registration process for those Chapter 105 general permits, and we also improved the standard operating procedures to conduct those reviews. So already we made some significant improvements to that process itself. Now, combined with the new platform that we're working on, we are looking to automate a lot of those processes to cut out a lot of those bureaucracies. So that's incoming as well, but we are making all the efficiency improvements that we can right now to implement those permit programs. As far as the Army Corps of Engineers is concerned, we do have an agreement with them. The idea is to do a one-stop shop. So we have a process. We collect some data for that permit process for the Army Corps in order to, facilitate that process for the applicant in this one-stop shop concept. So it's like really a service to the applicant in that situation. We encourage all applicants, though, for those registration requests to get their PNDI clearances up front. That way they can get those registrations through the permitting process more efficiently. So that's a really important issue, because sometimes when they don't have the clearances from these resource agencies, the other resource agencies like U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or other resource agencies, they don't have those clearances for these endangered species. It really holds up the approval process. So we encourage applicants to obtain those clearances up front before they submit those registration requests.
Thanks, the gentlelady. Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Secretary Shirley and Secretary Dunn for being here today. Appreciate it. I'm going to ask my first question to Secretary Shirley. I know you spoke briefly on well plugging and what's happening within the Commonwealth for orphan well plugging. I wanted to ask, how many wells has the department plugged since the beginning of the Shapiro-Davis administration?
We are very close to plugging our 300th well, so like 295 or so.
And how many wells do you think are still existing that need to be plugged within the Commonwealth?
On our abandoned well list, we have about 28,000. So those are where we've actually gone out, we've put eyes on them, and we've gone through all of the legal research that's involved with it. But there are some academic estimates that say that Pennsylvania has upwards of 200 to 300,000 of abandoned wells.
Do you have an estimated cost of what that would be to plug all that is needed to be plugged?
We do. I believe it's in the trillions.
Wow. Okay. So we have a long way to go.
We do.
We do. I wanted to ask, so with regard, I'm going to switch gears. This is for Secretary Dunn. We all know that the Commonwealth receives revenues from existing leases on state lands. Those proceeds are deposited into the Oil and Gas Lease Fund. So for a couple of years from 2020 through 2022, as a natural gas commodity prices increased, the fund saw significant increases as well. But since natural gas prices have come down and almost leveled off, those revenues have normalized. Can you talk about the importance of those proceeds as well as the need for additional revenue sources for the agency?
No, thanks for that. And Oil and Gas Lease Fund revenues come to us from both the leases that were done on state forest land in 08 and 10. There's currently a moratorium on new leases on state forest land. And they come to us from what we call on the river leasing, where a company that owns land on both sides, or at least mineral rights on both sides, crosses under the Commonwealth's waterways. And those riverland leases are continuing, because anytime the Commonwealth's property is crossed, then we seek revenues and get revenues for that. The revenues this year we expect from Oil and Gas Fund to be, where is it? Oh, where it's not. 78 million, thank you. And so it's steady and declining, as you pointed out, both because of prices, the prices are low, and the supply is somewhat limited, but again, the riverland leases continue. What we have seen with the existing leases in 08 and 10 is continued expansion of their lease footprint, so there is active engagement with the leaseholders and attaining and drilling new wells and using the leases they have, so that we're now up to a build out of about 55% on the leases on state forest land. So we use that to support our mission. We use it to support conservation and monitoring of the forest lands that host the wells. We use it to advance conservation and the purposes of the public estate, conservation, natural resources, monitoring, management of the public lands.
All right, well, thank you. And I appreciate your answers. I understand that as these revenues continue to stay flat or even go further down, we're going to have to be looking for other resources and revenue streams. So I look forward to that conversation with you, and hopefully we'll find that soon.
Yeah, I'd like to, in this since I still have a green light, I'd just point out that the public lands are generating a lot of funding for the Commonwealth's revenue through outdoor recreation. Outdoor recreation, as I pointed out, is booming at $17 billion to the Commonwealth's economy. And so these public lands are really performing not just for the public value of people enjoying the forest and the trails and the parks, but for the economy of Pennsylvania. The governor created an Office of Outdoor Recreation. They're running a set of workshops here in March with the outdoor businesses that are supported by public lands and parks and recreational amenities. So the real sleeping giant in economy for DCNR's mission is really outdoor recreation.
Appreciate that.
A lot comes into our revenue from that.
We've seen the good work you've done with that too, and appreciate your time. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
If I could just clarify, I carried too many zeros in my head. It would be about 30 billion.
30 billion, that's
Yeah.
better than
30
the
billion,
trillions.
yes.
Okay.
I was like,
That's an
not right.
important detail.
Yeah, did
Thank
I
you.
say 19 billion? If it sounded like million, it's billion.
It's still a large number,
recreation.
so.
Big numbers.
Thank
you for your time.
Representative Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, secretaries, for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to ask you guys questions. Secretary Dunn, I'm going to focus my questions with you. Obviously, as you know, represent large parts of state forest in my district with Michaud State Forest. I'm an avid, I hunt in state forest land and Buchanan State Forest. I'm a huge supporter of state parks. It's a big part of my district. That being said, when I meet with folks in my district, whether it's from DCNR with the forestry office there, or state park administrators or whatever the case, they always talk to me about staffing issues or needs of more resources when it comes to personnel. However, the department, and I think the governor's theme is to expand these state parks or state properties. I know I think we're going to have the 125th state park now in Fayette County. Again, great opportunities, great ideas. My concern, though, is that how are we sustaining the parks we have now? How are we going to make sure that we have the resources for the state forests and the state parks that we have now, and what is that plan to get there?
Well, I just say this, the state legislature is part of that plan. We have people like you in the state legislature who really get out there, engage with the state forests and parks. We really appreciate it. I know I spent a lot of time with members of this body in the Senate understanding the value of the local parks and forests to their districts. And we know that state parks through recreation, state forests through recreation and the forest product industry, and through the existing gas well leases are bringing revenue into the Commonwealth. Not all of that revenue comes into our revenue stream. It comes into the Commonwealth through the businesses supported by the timber industry, supported by outdoor recreation, supported by oil and gas. And so those revenues are lifting the Commonwealth. As someone pointed out earlier, maybe Secretary Shirley, and Governor Shapiro is very competitive. He wants Pennsylvania to lead in everything. And we see the public land as being the cornerstone of our improved economy and our ability to attract and keep young people in Pennsylvania. Just like you love the public lands, people choose to live. We're seeing it in your county, in Franklin and Cumberland County, where I live, Adams and York County. We're some of the fastest growing areas of the Commonwealth. And when you talk to people, it's quality of life.
Yeah, and Madam Secretary, on that note, and kind of bring it back to Michaud, one example is dealing with the bane of your existence, Ridge Road. But on the other side of Ridge Road, where there's a lot of private property along that road, I know one of the concerns there is some of the residents is the road improvements. Obviously, they've chosen to live kind of adjacent to a state forest. But I know when talking with the head forester down there is they don't have enough people to maintain some of those roads. So they can only do it certain times of the year, or they had to retrain somebody because the other person left or retired. So it's those issues, right? It's maintaining the parks we have, right? Right. And making sure that those parks have the resources. So how is the department prioritizing existing parks as opposed to continuing to add. I mean, I think we've added 3 or 4 new parks over the last couple years, which again, I respect that mission, but I think we have got to take care of the parks we have now first.
I hear you, and we're doing a number of things. We have a constant eye on efficiency. You know, this picture, we open up at 179 different locations every morning, 179 parks, forest districts, maintenance offices. So it's a big challenge, and we do it through great staff. The staff we have, as you interact with, phenomenal people. We respect them. We give them what they need to do their jobs. We have internal structures that help support their work. We've done an efficiency move in state parks where we've created these regionalization of park clusters so that we can have mutual support structures. And then we have projects like the South Mountain Initiative, South Mountain Partnership, where we have our forest districts and parks working in congruity. So that way, if a district forester in Michaud has an incident, he can call the parks. The park rangers are down there fast because the parks exist in that matrix. So we have a constant eye on efficiency. We look for operational excellence. We have to, again, with this.
And Madam Secretary, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but there's one last thing that just a very quick, maybe not even an answer or a plug, but I'd be remiss. I don't represent the South Mountain Golf Course, but I know that's a huge issue over in the Michaud area. I know there's a lot of opposition to that. I hear about it. I guess what I'm asking is to keep an open mind with that. I think there is a desire to keep that open, or at least and while still having a visitor center, it's a huge state forest to keep that opportunity available for folks. I've heard from a lot of constituents on that issue.
No, I appreciate that. And they're a valued leaseholder for years, and as you know, that lease is coming to end this year, as was planned for a number of years. We have complete respect for their operation. They've done a great job there. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Young.
Good morning. Happy Black History Month, everybody. It was so refreshing to hear my colleague who represents Pike and Wayne counties speak so passionately about the need to prioritize our children in this great Commonwealth. So I look forward to continuing our discussion, especially as we unpack the education topic. So thank you again. Secretary Dunn, your department and my district office have met several times around environmental concerns, specifically around Bartram's Garden and the surrounding communities. Thank you for your willingness to create an opportunity where systems can better communicate not only with each other, but with the community, because the concern was how things were unpacking and how the communities were being shared the information. So we met, and I believe we came to some solutions. So I want to say thank you for that. But as we're discussing appropriations today, can you share with us how you were able to improve your process of communicating properly with not only the systems, but the community to improve how we can be more in sync with making sure that our community members feel invested in the process of anything that is impacting their community?
I think this question's for me.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. I think the situation that we had in Bartram's Garden, we definitely did some after action review there. And the biggest thing that was noted was communications and failure of communications. And we have, since that time, we have developed new values for the agency, one of them being communications, meaning everyone within my department is responsible for thinking about how we are communicating with the community and doing so in a way that is easily understood and in a way that is not condescending, or just engaging with them. So we've worked on our processes specifically in our Southeast Regional Office with our communications office, our legislative liaison, and our environmental justice coordinator about how we can better work together to make sure that when there is an issue or there is something that needs to be communicated, that we're doing it in a very thoughtful, meaningful way and reaching community members where they are.
Awesome.
May I add something to that, though?
Sure.
'Cause Bartram's Garden is a place that we've given grants to, And we've actually learned that the leaders at Bartram's Garden, okay, when we think about that community, it was cut off from the Schuylkill River for a long time. And so it wasn't, to actually allow people and get people down to the river to kayak, to have access to the river, the Schuylkill River Trail we talked about earlier, took a deliberate outreach in the community. And I thought the partners of Bartram's Garden and the neighborhood groups did a phenomenal job at opening up this opportunity for that neighborhood. So that's what we've learned in our Mosaic work, and DCNR, our DEIB work is called Mosaic. It's where we really reach out to the community. We've learned partner with entities that are in the neighborhoods that are trusted, as Secretary Shirley said, and then really engage within, open up opportunities through programming and through partnerships that we are able to do through our C2P2 grant program.
No, absolutely. And my apologies for mixing up the names, because I do deal with you a lot because I'm on tourism, and I know I ask a lot of questions of you specifically around those tourist areas in my community. So either way, I'm glad you're both here because you add value to my district in 185th. Let me ask you about your workforce development initiatives, like both of you. So as you're improving communications and including more systems and community in part of your particular departments, talk to me a little bit more about your workforce development initiatives. As you're communicating the access to resources that these communities and systems have access to, are you also including your hiring practices conversations?
I'll start with, we have a really strong program there called the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps that we launched about 10 years ago exactly, where we employ youth either for the summer if they're 15 to 18-year-old, or 10 months if they're 18 to 25, working in the public lands, working in conservation, getting a direct experience so that they understand what it's entailed and what it would take to get a full-time civil service job in that realm. And through that pipeline, we've been able to bring on a lot of staff, about 60 staff, into our workforce. It creates a pipeline for us to diverse communities, to a variety of backgrounds and experiences, because young people don't always know where they want to go. And if it's not something that someone in their family, like me, my dad was in the same field, if it's not someone like that, then they need to have an experience that lets them know the careers that are possible. So part of our work is engaging with young people and actually creating a job opportunity, and that's been really rewarding. I don't know if Secretary Shirley has
I don't have time. I'm getting the eyeball over here.
I guess you can email me your response, Secretary Shirley. Thank you so much.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and welcome Secretary Shirley and Team DEP. Welcome Secretary Dunn, Team DCNR, and Secretary Dunn. I'll direct my questioning to you and start by saying that recreational off-roading is an ATV tourism. Has and will continue to revitalize small towns and small communities like mine in Schuylkill and Berks counties and throughout the Commonwealth. It's important to recognize that this is and will continue to be an economic driver for Pennsylvania, for this Commonwealth. It's family-oriented recreation. And if you think of the investment, right, you have a $70,000 vehicle towing a $10,000 trailer loaded with another $60,000 or $100,000 of equipment on it. And the reason I say that is this isn't a one-time a family vacation. This is groups of people investing in family-oriented recreation outdoors. And small town revitalization is not just having those visitors going to restaurants and bars. I think sometimes people will say, oh, it's Hell's Angels coming into our neighborhood. It's not. It's families. And they don't use restaurants and bars. They use salons, and they use barbershops, and they use grocery stores and laundromats, and they use banks and car washes and gas stations and boutiques and hardware stores and shops. And they worship with us at our churches too. So thank you for your continued support and embracing ATV tourism. And Secretary Dunn, I stood with you and Deputy Secretary, boy, I guess it was more people from the DCNR team about 2022 in northern Schuylkill County at the Catawissa Recreation Area, and for the announcement of the first state-owned recreation area for motorized off-road vehicles. And so what's the status of that park and projected final construction, equipment, and operating costs for that area?
I'll just say something briefly, and I'll turn it over to John Norbeck, who's leading that project with the Bureau of Forestry and with his executive assistant. But Catawissa is one of the most exciting things that happened. I do have to share a little credit with DEP because their BAMR, the Bureau of Abandoned Minelands program, is cleaning up the Catawissa and has put $1 million into the Catawissa project. So they're a partner in that, and oftentimes it's these places that are abandoned mines that we can remake into a wonderful opportunity for the future. And in your area is a cluster of these opportunities: Anthracite Outdoors, Roush Creek. Again, abandoned mines, it's really making lemonade out of what was lemons, abandoned mines. And it is a tremendous opportunity. Every time I drive into Shamokin or the communities around there, you see community being lifted by this economic activity. And you mentioned all the elements of the businesses, but I'll add to that, these machines break down, and there's a thriving business of mechanics in these communities surrounding these. So I'll turn it over to John Norbeck for the exact update on the Catawissa.
Sure, I'll try to be succinct as possible. So the idea of the Catawissa off-road area is, it will be managed by the Bureau of Forestry, but we want to do that.
So it is going to be managed by the state. It's not going to be managed by an outside.
That's what I'm getting at. So the resources will be managed by the Bureau of Forestry, but they're also going to this year do an RFP, which would solicit for an outside vendor that really works in motorized recreation to be our daily operator for that facility. We have about $3 million of infrastructure money set aside for the Catawissa program. We've also, and since the time that we purchased it, we've put in some bridges across some streams so we can keep our folks at DEP happy and actually clean up the stream. The Secretary talked about BAMR doing work there. They're going to clean up the water coming out of the Adrian borehole, which feeds the Catawissa Creek, and in time will clean up about 23 miles of the Catawissa right down to the Susquehanna. So it really is using motorized recreation to tell a restoration story right in Schuylkill and Luzerne County.
Right. Do you know when, Deputy Secretary, do you know when it'll be fully operational?
Once we select an operator, it'll be a conversation with the operator.
Okay, and you said that RFP will be going out?
It's this year.
This year?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you also, I'm sorry, I just saw my time's up. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. I want to thank DCNR, Secretary Dunn, Deputy Secretary Norbeck, and thank you for some of the good work you've done in my district the last year. We had a really complicated issue that was decades long that a bunch of legislators tried to address regarding the Delaware River and the Lowhead Dam there, that there wasn't adequate signage. And it was a real danger for people recreationally using the river. And we really appreciate you and the Deputy Secretary helping us with that really complicated problem and really doing a lot of good in New Hope Borough for us. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I was very excited about the governor's proposal to have an Office of Outdoor Recreation. I think it was 2 years ago. The office is up and running. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about some of the successes from that program and where you see it going.
Okay, well, the Office of Outdoor Recreation is convening a set of public meetings across Pennsylvania in March, and that's with the businesses, the wide variety of businesses that are supported by outdoor recreation. And the process is called Elevate, to elevate outdoor recreation businesses, and it's to understand how they could become more united. If you think about agriculture, the ag industry works in a united way. The feed suppliers, the equipment suppliers, the John Deeres and New Hollands, all the equipment, all these services that support ag are organized, but all the services that support outdoor recreation are not. So the Elevate process will convene them, bring them together, answer a series of questions. What are their needs? How can they best be supported and united? And our hope is once the outdoor industry really finds each other and gets united across the Commonwealth, they'll become a voice for public lands. They'll become a voice for outdoor recreation. They'll become a voice for elevating economy in Pennsylvania through outdoor recreation, for really doing what the governor wants to do, making Pennsylvania the great American getaway, attracting more people in, and also really serving our residents by boosting the economy across these small communities across Pennsylvania, and attracting people who want to live, work, and play. So it's all tied in. Again, we had not developed relationships with a lot of these businesses. We had business relationships, with some of the parks. We have about 130 concession agreements where there's providers in a park, maybe for a kayak rental, maybe for food concession. But beyond that, we didn't have strong relationships with the outdoor business.
And is it helping connect some of the camping grounds and the entertainment things that we're doing, say on the river or those kind of things?
Absolutely. There's providers, outfitters, fishing outfitters, kayak, canoe, livery services, the elements that support their business, the people that stay over and need a place to stay over. There's a hospitality industry, of course, plays a role. You've got some manufacturing in the Commonwealth for outdoor recreation amenities. We're trying to find all the manufacturing and support them. I see your colleague, Paul Tasak, is in the back. He's part of the internal committee working with Nathan Rigner on finding these businesses and elevating the work that they do and bringing it to the forefront.
Well, we definitely appreciate in Central Bucks the work you're doing. It's a big part, outdoor recreation is a big part of our local economy there, and we really do appreciate it. One last thing I'd like to ask you about is, can you tell us a little bit about the PA outdoor trail system, some of the successes over the last year, and possibly also about the $5 million in funding requested and what benefits that might go to?
Well, thank you for that, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, so we're a trail state in Pennsylvania. We really struck a leadership position in trails going way back to the beginning of DCNR 30 years ago, when Governor Ridge had a green ribbon task force on greenways and trails. And from that launched a real rail trail initiative, and we have rail trails across the Commonwealth. We have foot trails in our state forest land that were built by our predecessors in the Bureau of Forest. It was Forest and Waters at the time. And then we have a need for ever increasing more trails. When we do the state recreation planning process, which we're about to conclude right now, every 5 years we do one, trails come out as number one. So we ask in this budget to have $5 million to complete the Glenanoco Trail and make it safe. We'll transfer that land from the Game Commission to build a safe trail. That'll involve steps and platforms and guardrails, and then to launch the 125th State Park at Laurel Caverns.
Well, and thank you for that. My son and I are very appreciative of the work you're doing at Glenoroco Falls. We're looking forward to trying that out once you
Good, yeah. Be careful at Glenanoco. We'll have it safe by the time we open it up.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, secretaries, for being here today. Yes, good shout out to you as well on the personal front. I first want to, Secretary Shirley, I first want to thank you and recognize that in meetings with your office, with our caucus meeting with your office, I truly think your commitment to try to improve Pennsylvania's permitting and actually get some things going. I know our pathways may differ, but I think at times, you're swimming upstream against what is a several thousand person bureaucracy, and I applaud you for working to implement that change. Before we get into the questions, I first wanted to correct the record, but the gentleman from Westmoreland had mentioned about projects in Ohio. You said they're not building projects in Ohio. I'd like to share with you, this is June 2023, Power Magazine, a 1.8 gigawatt power plant coming online. This is the Ohio Sitting Board. If my information is correct, citing Ohio, that since Reggie, they've added 3.5 gigawatts of new power and have an additional 3.1 gigawatts under construction. Because everyone's watching and it's important to be factual. Would you like to correct your earlier record?
I was referring to the PJM queue, what's in the interconnection queue right now. There is only one facility that's currently in the interconnection queue.
Okay, that's great. And that queue, unfortunately, is an 8-year window. I just want, because it's important to show the contrast that I think we're all trying to work together to change. When we look at Ohio in 2023, $13 billion of new investment. West Virginia, 2023, $4.5 billion. Pennsylvania, $215 million. So I think there is a stark contrast. And I also agree with you, natural gas is at a really good price right now. We want that investment. And we are trying to do good things. Yesterday, your department made an announcement of the $400 million that the Trump administration sent. And as my understanding, in here, the governor said he's taking real action to create jobs and grow our economy, which we all agree with. But in looking at the details, this will be energy efficiency, heat recovery systems, swapping out of diesel generators and capturing methane. Will this $400 million from Washington, the Trump administration coming to Pennsylvania, is this going to generate new energy projects?
So the RISE program that you are referring to was appropriated from the EPA under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants last year. It's about $396 million for industrial decarbonization. So the purpose of it is to draw down, looking at existing industrial facilities, and draw down their carbon emissions through various projects. So
yes,
it won't be new projects, but it will be new projects in the sense that it could be retrofits, but
Yeah,
as far as like new
that's great.
construction, probably not.
That's great. So thank you. It will not generate new construction, but it is wonderful. And I thought it was really telling. The gentleman from Philadelphia mentioned that 10 days of uncertainty. He was very concerned, and I share him with it. Business needs reliability. 10 days possibly caused partners to withdraw. So when Pennsylvania is one of the only states where the governor is spending millions of dollars to fund the Reggie fight, I think Spotlight PA said $2.7 million for years. What is the consequence of lost opportunity as a result of that business unreliability?
I don't know that that's something that could be quantified, because it's not just in Pennsylvania where we're seeing the lack of new power coming online.
Sure. And I know I only have about 20 seconds left. So, and respectfully, Madam Secretary, because your press release did quantify that $400 million created 6,000 jobs. So if we look at the 11 projects canceled since Reggie, $7 billion, that equates, using your numbers, to over 100,000 lost construction jobs. Can you comment on how we can change this trend?
I don't know how that was determined, that there would be that many job losses, but I can tell you that the governor supports any environmental policy that does three things, one of which is creating jobs, one is lowering emissions, and the other is lowering prices for consumers.
I see my time's up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Curry.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I appreciate both of you being here today, and I just want to say to Secretary Dunn, thank you for all the work that you're doing on the parks and making sure things are great for our communities. I know Rep. Khan talked about the mental health issues of so many, and I was just talking to a therapist the other day who uses echotherapy and really is working hard to make that a real priority in our Commonwealth. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Secretary Shirley, this question is really for you. In thinking about protecting our working families, and particularly our Black and brown communities where environmental justice issues continue to plague us, unfortunately, I'm really interested in talking about things like lead and PFAS substances, which need additional PFAS testing. And I know that Delaware County is working really hard, that's where I represent in the 164th District, on lead remediation. They have a big campaign going on right now. I'm seeing the billboards as I drive down the street. But could you discuss the need for testing, more testing of those substances? And particularly as one of the co-chairs of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, everyone here knows I'm always going to talk about maternal health. And when we think about looking particularly at, infant mortality rates and maternal mortality, particularly in the Black community, where we don't know why these numbers are so high, I really want to talk about how DEP can do more in determining the scope of these types of substances and how they might in turn continue to protect these families, because we don't really know the impact and how it's working, but I'm just looking at numbers that need to come down where mortality is concerned.
Yeah, so on the topic of lead, it's no secret Pennsylvania has one of the higher levels of lead in the country, and part of that is due to our old housing stock. We're an old state. A lot of the homes that we have still have lead plumbing in them or have lead service lines. So we've been working through Penvest with communities to eliminate lead service lines. Recently, we kicked off an effort through our Environmental Justice Interagency Council specifically around lead, and that is where we pull together various agencies, including the Department of Health, to talk about specific issues. And the first one we talked about was lead. And what we're doing right now is we're looking to find if there are any gaps in where DEP's work starts and the Department of Health's work starts. And other agencies like the Department of Community and Economic Development are involved in this as well. There's many pathways for lead. We do have testing for water. We have an initiative right now specifically for schools and childcare facilities where they can basically get free testing. And if there is lead that has been determined to be in that facility, we can use the money that's been appropriated from a federal grant to install point of use filters to filter that lead out. As far as maternal health goes, this is something that's personally a passion of mine. I think there's a number of factors, but one of the biggest things that I think we could work with the Department of Health on this, because I know this is a big issue for the Department of Health as well, is looking at air quality in certain areas, because there are, I'm sure there are studies out there that have linked poor air quality to increased maternal health.
That's wonderful, and I appreciate that. And the last thing that I wanted to ask, in my district in Upper Darby, we've had a history of flooding. I remember Governor Wolf came and we had a big thing, and that was before I was here. But I just want to know what we can continue to do to get folks to get ready and be prepared in the state when environmental disasters come.
I don't know that there's ever a real preparation that anyone can do, for a flood. It's unfortunate. I think, though, as communities, we need to look at it holistically and look at watersheds holistically and how we can better manage water that's going into those receiving waters. So I mentioned Pennsylvania is very old. That means we have very old infrastructure. And what we used to do was pave everything, create a stormwater drain. It goes into a pipe, and then somewhere it goes into a stream. We have really lost groundwater infiltration in a lot of places, and that's what I personally think needs to be prioritized, is getting that precipitation into the ground, into our groundwater, and away from those surface waters where there's the potential for flooding.
Thank you, Secretary Shirley and Secretary Dunn. Appreciate your work.
Thank the gentle lady. Representative Kutz.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Secretaries. Thank you so much for being here. First, let me begin, Secretary Dunn, with a note of thanks for the work that your department did on Ridge Road in Mount Holly Springs. We had a collaborative effort, state, local, county, and appreciate the work that your team did on the ground there to help the residents at the top of the mountain there on Ridge Road. So thank you.
Thanks for bringing it to our attention. I'm glad that it all worked out the way it did.
Much appreciated. We had a good discussion about it at a budget hearing before, so I wanted to follow up with that. If I can direct my attention actually for my question to Secretary Shirley. It's been reported that PFAS has been found in Middle Creek outside of Shippensburg in Cumberland County. This is west of the district I represent, the 87th, but the source water does flow through my district, which is why I'm concerned about it. And Secretary, you had mentioned yesterday that similar systems are going to be reporting their PFAS numbers this year, and it's going to cost a lot for treatment to be put in place for water suppliers. I'm curious if DEP is aware of this particular issue and if you're doing anything to investigate it.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the creeks I grew up playing in. I'm from Shippensburg, so I'm very familiar. I used to run past my grandparents' house. The truth is, you know, PFAS is in most of our surface waters, and it's getting there from our wastewater treatment plants. We have been working and waiting on the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to make a determination about permitting requirements for discharges. PFAS is in our bodies. It comes out of our bodies, goes into the sewer system, goes through a wastewater treatment plant, and then eventually gets finds its way to a stream through a permitted source. So we're waiting for EPA, and you know, hopefully we'll be working those requirements into new permits.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer. As a follow-up, could you tell me if there are ways to treat the contamination at the source if the source is identified?
So we do that with drinking water. It's one of the easier places to filter it out from. You can have carbon filtration. I think that's one of the things that folks are determining right now for wastewater is how it would get filtered out. It would probably be through a very similar process as it would be on the drinking water, but you know, PFAS is coming into our environment in many different ways. By the time it's in our drinking water, it found its way to the drinking water from some other source. So we have to identify the source and then remove it, remediate it, and get rid of it. And there's just so many questions about that.
I appreciate the response. It is definitely an issue that we're going to have to tackle this session. I look forward to working collaboratively with you on that. And I want to thank you both and your teams for taking the time here today. Thank you.
Chair, thanks. Gentlemen, Chair recognizes Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretaries. It's great to see you both today. So, Secretary Shirley, I'm sure it's not a surprise that I'm going to ask about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is stormwater management. And I've said this before when I was in local government. One of the most difficult votes I ever had to take was imposing a stormwater fee on my residents because of the, burden placed by EPA and DEP. I just want to ask, and I understand, PennVest can help. I'm in the process of getting information on how many local stormwater projects have actually been approved by PennVest, but I just want to ask, where are we in terms of our stormwater management in the Commonwealth? Is there a group that rates such things, or has the DEP seen evidence of, cleanup in our rivers, creeks, and streams because of local stormwater management?
That's an interesting question that I've never had phrased that way, so thank you for that. I think when it comes to stormwater, one of the things that folks have to understand about Pennsylvania is that because of our municipal structure, the way that we manage stormwater on a municipal level is very overwhelming compared to other states. So the state of Maryland, they regulate it at the county level, and they have maybe less than 10 MS4 permits that they deal with. In Pennsylvania, my agency, we oversee and we work with municipalities in the thousands.
Right.
So it is a huge effort. We have seen success in regional stormwater management because it does aggregate and it gives you more options and opportunities for where projects can be. Stormwater, it is a water quality issue, but I think more and more we're seeing that it is tied to flooding. And when stormwater controls aren't adequate, and again, you continue to pave and develop, it becomes more and more important that that stormwater be managed in a way and redirected away from homes and businesses that have, that could see huge losses of their investments because of it. So there's also a little bit of funding that we got this year for planning. Do you want to quickly mention something on that?
Under the Clean Streams Fund 2 years ago, there was about $8.8 million available for counties to update their comprehensive stormwater management plans. We received some interest in this funding, and we were able to award $2.7 million to counties that took us up on this opportunity and wanted to engage and update their plans.
Well, thank you. And it's, I don't mean to cut you off, but my time's limited. It's certainly a start. I think another way the Commonwealth could help is to pay its stormwater fees to municipalities on state buildings. I have a bill that I'm going to reintroduce to make that happen. So, so thank you, Secretary Shirley. I appreciate that. Secretary Dunn, how many people have, first of all, I want to say thank you to DCNR. My district has been the recipient of many DCNR grants to help improve recreation, whether we're talking about playgrounds, whether we're talking about passive recreation. So thank you very much for that. We're blessed to have the Greenbelt in my district, so I'm very happy for that. But I wanted to talk about workforce development a little bit. How many people have gained employment in DCNR since the PA Outdoor Corps program started?
Yeah, I think it's about 58 have gained employment with DCNR, and every one of the people that have been part of Outdoor Corps have learned job skills that have helped them wherever they've landed. Like I said, we've employed a number, about 58 in our agency, and some of them have even elevated to promotions already. And,
that's wonderful.
They have great leadership abilities because we get to see them on the ground, when they first come into the program. It's funny, working with young people, the entire executive team and I make a point of going out and working with crews in the summer and in the 3 seasons that are operating. And you can pick out leadership abilities in some of these young people right away. I mean, from the day they walk into the program. We're actually training up our adult crews right now. Nearby up in northern Dauphin County is the training area, and they're learning all the job skills they need. Both labor and industry helps us bring the workforce skills to bear. They help fund the program. Rep. Nelson's been a supporter of it in the committee there, but they learn soft skills like showing up, communicating, writing a good resume, meeting people in the eye, shaking hands. And they learn hard skills, like actual work skills on the job. It's one of the most gratifying programs that we've had the honor of implementing in DCNR. We'd like to invite you out to work with a crew someday. And what we do is we ask participants, legislators who come out to share their work experience with the young people.
Well, thank you so much for cultivating the next generation of young conservation leaders. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Mustela.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretaries, welcome. My question is to you, Acting Secretary Shirley. Having to do with RGGI, PACER, PRESS, all of these cute little acronyms that we're hearing about, in the past few months here, and how your office is going to consider these initiatives, these rulemakings, and that could possibly force the closure of a lot of different industries throughout our Commonwealth here. You may remember a year ago when I stood before you, Cleveland Cliffs, the Butler Works, was on the verge of closing because of a ridiculous rule that came down from the U.S. Department of Energy that we could have lost about 1,500 jobs, lost an entire community over this. And because of a lot of fighting and even with the governor's help that we shut this down. So I'm kind of surprised that he came back with some of his own initiatives and his own rulemaking that could possibly do the same thing. So that could do to others what could have happened to the Butler Works of Cliffs. So the question I have is, with all of these, and we have companies that want to move into Pennsylvania, and the quote that I have is, the PJM market needs and values reliable, dispatchable, non-duration limited power. And in response, we are restarting our PJM development efforts. We are focusing on locations in Ohio and Pennsylvania, although clarity regarding state-level air emissions regulations is needed for projects to move forward in Pennsylvania. How would they ever move forward in Pennsylvania with new rules and new regulations and new initiatives coming out of our administration?
I think part of the governor's new lightning plan, or the bulk of it, the purpose of it, is to address those barriers. So, you know, I mentioned the governor's three-part test. One of those is job creation, and we certainly would not want to see job losses because of any environmental plan. But the truth is, the energy markets have changed significantly since a lot of our energy laws were written. So AEPS, I think, was passed in 2004. Act 129 was 2008. We're now in 2025, and we're seeing constraints through PJM on what is being built and what is being proposed to be built by developers. So part of what the governor has presented, I think one of the things that everyone should get excited about is the reset board, which is the siting board. Pennsylvania is one of the only states that doesn't have a siting board specifically for energy projects. And what happens is then you're dealing with not just state level permits, but constraints also at local level, because a lot of folks don't want to see these projects built in their backyards. So as a board that could be developed specifically around siting, that could help take some of the uncertainty out of location and potential development. But I don't think the goal of any of the plan that has been presented is job loss, and I think that's something that can continue to be discussed as these plans.
Well, there's job loss, but there's also bringing jobs in, bringing new jobs in, and I don't see how these may prevent that. I mean, Reggie could prevent a lot, so could this Pacer and Press.
When we model, I mean,
you know, it's one thing to retain jobs, but it's also recruiting new jobs.
When we modeled Reggie, there's an opportunity for job creation. These haven't been modeled yet because there's still a lot to be determined, but that could be something that, you know, is part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank the gentlelady. Chairman Vitale. Chairman, we need you to come up to this mic around, this one right here.
Okay. Thank you to everyone on this panel for all the great work they do. I'm going to direct my comments to Secretary Shirley, and nothing I say today should take away from the fact I have an enormous respect for you and the 2,600 or so dedicated DEP employees. But the fact of the matter is that DEP is significantly understaffed. They have 337 positions less now than in 2002. And since 2002, you've had an enormous increase in responsibilities, such as the advent of the shale gas industry, more federal air and water regulations. You have to implement the emergence of PFAS and so forth. With regard to the oil and gas program, a December 2022 report from the DEP stated that the abandonment of wells and the failure to report drilling activity is a part of the culture of the gas industry. It's interesting to note in the materials that the DEP provided me, since 2022, up to 1,254 wells in Pennsylvania have been illegally abandoned. I'll repeat that. 1,254 wells have been illegally abandoned in the past 3 years. It's fine that we've plugged 295 wells in the past 2 years, but we are abandoning wells in Pennsylvania at a rate over double the rate that we are plugging them. In materials you provided me, there are up to 56,000 up to 56,000 orphaned and abandoned wells in Pennsylvania. Brine spreading, illegally dumping brine on roadways is a continual problem. DEP and the oil and gas program don't have the boots on the ground to stop this illegal activity. Right now, the oil and gas program has 190 people, but in 2015, they had 228 people. They don't need more permitters. What they need is more inspectors. They need more people to enforce. The water program. 1/3 of Pennsylvania streams, according to DEP, a full 1/3, 28,000 miles of Pennsylvania streams are impaired. And according to data DEP gave me, your water program only has the staff to inspect PA streams once every 30 years. Once every 30 years. Federal government requirements require this be done every 10 years, but you don't have the staffing to do it more than once every 30 years. In 2007, the water program had 778 filled positions. Last September, you were down to 650 positions. Your air program, you have 89 positions less than in 2005. The number of state air monitors was 231 air monitors in 2014. Now it's down to 172. So it went from 231 to 172 air monitors, due in part to lack of staff. The air program has had negligible inspections of methane from conventional wells. The HASCA program is down 20 positions since 2013. They need more staff to investigate contaminants with regard to PFAS. Concerning in the information your office gave me is there are 50 fixed fire training facilities, 50 fixed fire training facilities where PFAS is suspected, but investigation has not yet begun. You know, we don't need more staffing for permitting. We need inspection and enforcement. This is not the Department of Business Development. It's the Department of Environmental Protection. We don't need to deliver permits at the speed of business. We need to deliver permits at the speed necessary to protect the environment. So my questions are for you.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, your 5 minutes has expired. Can we get the question on the record and I'll have them respond in writing?
Fine.
Thank you, sir.
What are we going to do to stop the abandonment of oil and gas wells? Question 1. What are we going to do to increase the frequency of stream what are we going to do to increase the frequency of stream inspections? 2. 3, what are we going to do to increase the number of air monitors? And 4, what are we going to do with regard to these 50 fixed fire training facilities where PFAS is suspected, but we don't have the resources to investigate them? Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Secretaries, if you could please, within a 2-week time period, respond to all 4 questions to both chairmen so we can pass it on to Chairman Vitale. Thank you. Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for joining us here today. One of the purposes of these hearings is to perhaps to find savings and efficiencies that we could then pass along to the taxpayers of this Commonwealth. On the federal level, we're seeing a very big push for government efficiency. With that said, given the fact that over the last 3 years we've been able to combine both of your agencies into one hearing, I have to wonder, what viability do you see in combining both of your agencies back together as they once were as the Department of Environmental Resources in 1995?
You can answer that.
I was around, so I can answer that. The data gathered by the policy chief at the time of the DER when it was together showed that the secretary at the time could only spend, I can't remember, it was 5% or 15% on the whole natural resources side. So parks, forests, geology didn't get any grants, didn't get any attention. So this potential growth opportunity that the Commonwealth has for quality of life and health wasn't realized to its fullest extent. And so I've seen functionality both ways, and it's much better as is. As you can tell, I mean, Secretary Shirley has a big job. I have a big job. You know, we open up 179 work locations. We run an $80 million grant program. And by the way, when it was combined, it was a tiny program, but a bureau from the old Department of Community Affairs came over to DCNR, so it combined recreation in one place. So community recreation and state park and forest recreation. I'd love to chat with you about that offline. That's something I'm passionate about. But I would say efficiency it comes in many forms, but in our case, we are leaders in what I call adaptive efficiency. Like, problems happen on the ground. There's a flood, there's a fire, and our staff swing into action because they're trained in multiple disciplines. Our wildland firefighters have other day jobs. They're maintenance people, managers, rangers, trained up in fire. So when PEMA has a call out for any emergency, our staff efficiently switch to another role. So efficiencies happen when you can really respect staff and support them and train them and take care of them, and then they really do perform for you.
Secretary Shirley, do you have any thoughts on combining the agencies as they were previously, since we're combined here in the hearing?
I mean, when you look at other states and the way that they're organized, most states are organized the way that Pennsylvania is, with separate and maybe even another agency on top of that. We have the unique perspective at DEP where we are also the natural resources extraction overseer that a lot of other state DEPs don't have. We also have the energy office. So, you know, my workload is big enough that if you expand that, then quite honestly, that means less touch that we would have throughout the department.
Okay. Thank you, and I guess it wouldn't be a DEP hearing if I didn't bring up Reggie at least once. Last year, Madam Secretary, there was a specific line item in the Clean Air Fund for revenue from Reggie, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in this year's budget, I did not see a line item for Reggie at all. Could you quickly discuss the governor's continued commitment to Reggie and its role in this year's budget?
I think, I don't know that the governor has a specific commitment to Reggie. I think the governor has said that he is open to other alternatives to Reggie. The governor did appeal the Commonwealth Court's decision based on executive authority, but I don't know that that was necessarily a full endorsement of the program. As far as why it was in the budget and why it's not in the budget, I think that's probably a question for our budget secretary. But I know last year it was just kind of an authorization that if it should become available that we would be
Are you anticipating revenues from Reggie?
Well, it hasn't even been argued at the Supreme Court yet, so I mean, I think it would be quite a while before we would even be able to determine that.
Okay, thank you. I understand there are other members that want to go, so with that in consideration, I will yield the remaining amount of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for joining us here today.
Thank the gentleman. Chair Mary Jo Daley.
Chairman. And welcome to both the
MJD, you got to move the mic up.
That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Well, when you're waiting for a long time, you're just speaking quietly. Okay, so welcome to the secretaries. My question is going to be for Secretary Dunn because of the relationship with tourism, recreation, and economic development and your department. So it's always good to see you. And I know that you've touched on outdoor recreation already, but we've heard a lot. I've been in a lot of meetings related to outdoor recreation, and I think it's pretty exciting what's happening in the department. But can you just talk about the specific roles that state parks play in outdoor recreation? And if you want to also mention Pennsylvania, the Great American Getaway, which I know you've also mentioned in earlier answers, how that affects, because that was that 4-hour drive to Pennsylvania. But the other, so I just want to ask if you can focus on attendance, economic impact, and accessibility.
Sure, absolutely. So we consider, you mentioned state parks, we consider that to be the nucleus, kind of crown jewel of recreation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Again, Pennsylvania is a recreation leader. I mentioned earlier, even beginning the Ridge administration, we struck a leadership position in trails, and we support that through our grants program primarily. And we're a leader in forests. We have 2.2 million acres of state forests, which offer a wonderful recreation opportunity. But when people are thinking recreation and look on a map, they go to a state park first, especially as we're trying to encourage new first-time users or people that are not familiar with recreation. They know if they come to a state park, they can talk to someone, maybe get a map, have a trail that it's accessible and really experience outdoor recreation directly. So we're able, we've kept up a high visitation in the state park system. It really blossomed during the COVID pandemic and has stayed high. And our reservations in everything where we take reservations from picnic pavilions to concessionaires to overnights, reservations have really stayed extremely high, 23% over pre-COVID time. So people are engaging in outdoor recreation, outdoor habits that they picked up during COVID, they're continuing with. We have a lot of demand on the park and forest system. And a very fair question came up about focusing on maintaining what we have, but the truth is we have an expanding demand. And we're really reaching out to try to accommodate all Pennsylvanians. Our Constitution in Pennsylvania, last year's hearing, it came up a couple of times, really demands that we provide access to nature and outdoors and clean air and clean water for all Pennsylvanians. And so to do that, you've really got to provide close-to-home recreation. Our state park system was designed with equity in mind. There's a state park within 25 minutes of every Pennsylvanian, but we want to double down on that and create a local park or a trail within 10 minutes of every Pennsylvanian. We find for the benefits that we really are seeking in physical health and mental health and quality of life, you've really got to have the close-to-home opportunity, culminating in also a state park visit, perhaps for a weekend if you're not lucky enough to live really close to one. Accessibility is something that the First Lady, Lori Shapiro, has taken a strong interest in, and we were really gratified when the Governor and First Lady came to Black Shannon State Park when we unveiled with our partner, the Pennsylvania Park and Forest Foundation, colorblind viewers. 1 million Pennsylvanians are colorblind. I didn't know that actually until we did that event, and the Governor is one of them. So like imagining fall colors with being colorblind, you don't see the red and the green. So we're putting up leaf viewers for colorblind folks. Accessibility in trails, accessibility in kayak launches. I would argue like anyone could use help getting in and out of a kayak. You don't have to have it be ADA to need that, but we're trying to make the public lands, especially the state parks, more accessible to all. And that's a journey, and we're really happy to be on it. But that's something that's really been lifted up by this administration and their interest in recreation for all. And you mentioned the Great American Getaway. So the governor said that every time I say the words, I'll get an additional $1 million in the budget. So I'm hoping the legislature is with me on that one. So I'll keep saying Great American Getaway. But one of the benefits, looking at the competitive positioning for Pennsylvania, this is one of the areas, I don't want to put down surrounding state, but just picture some of our surrounding states and then picture Pennsylvania in comparison. We have a lot to offer, and if we can attract people to make that visit, couple-day visit, to a park, to a trail, and spend some money, one of our businesses, spend some money in outdoor recreation business, but also spend money in hospitality, get to experience Penn's Woods, get to experience our tremendous history. It's really illustrated by the pictorials in this very room. We can really benefit from that and really lift all Pennsylvanians.
Thank you so much. And I also want to just thank you very quickly that you have EV chargers at your state parks.
Yes, yeah, that is one of, I should have mentioned that. That is one of the main attractions. We are one of the state park systems that have managed to avoid a fee. It's based on the Constitution that these are owned by the citizens. These parks are everyone's parks. And so we welcome all, and we don't create a barrier like a fee.
Thank the gentlelady.
Thank you.
Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Want to try to get through this as quickly as possible. So first is that I wanted to talk a little bit about the Big Elk Creek State Park in Chester County. Last year, I was able to attend a policy committee in Representative Lawrence's district. Essentially, this area was the White Clay Creek Preserve. It was changed to a state park. Chester County commissioners, local municipalities, hundreds of people signed a petition to Governor Shapiro. Even a majority of the Big Elk Advisory Task Force that DCNR created all have asked DCNR to redesignate it as a preserve. So I just wanted to know, are you planning to listen to these voices? What are the next steps?
Okay, thank you for that. And yes, we have had a lot of interest in the Big Elk Creek State Park. We had brought that into the system when John Norbeck was State Park Director. As part of State Parklands, we purchased it with Commonwealth money. And
I know that I don't have that much time, so if you could just give me a status, maybe.
Next steps? Okay, we're taking, we had a task force that was developed to really to address some of the concerns that you mentioned, and they have done a good job at working with our staff to identify the footprint of trails, a visitor center, and a park office that very much mirror what any state park has. Minimize the footprint of that. We've begun restoration activities for the ecology of the park. It was highly impacted by the past activities, had a lot of invasive species, so we're improving the ecology. And we want to look at the cultural resources of that park before we settle in on a name. That park's right on the Mason-Dixon line, 1.5 miles of Mason-Dixon line, so you've got an incredible cultural story to tell there when you think about freedom seekers coming across that line. Great history with the DuPont Estates.
I'm sorry to interrupt, just because I have a lot I'm trying to get through, and we have two agencies here instead of just one. Okay. So are you listening to those voices? Yes. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So some of my colleagues have concerns that there's been a pattern of consistent government overreach and overspending, whether it is Big Elk Creek Park in Chester County, Lime Timber in northwestern Pennsylvania, or DCNR intruding on local private property rights issues in areas like Spruce Creek in Huntington County. In my district, I have Tyler State Park, which I know I've talked to you guys a lot about. We still have a lot of overcrowding and staffing issues. It's gotten better, but it's still not resolved. We still have local police and municipalities that are engaged in the state park because they simply have to be. And so my question is, do you think that you guys are operating in a good and transparent manner with these communities and these landowners? And when you have issues being litigated, how is this being managed with our existing line items and appropriations?
Sure, and I appreciate that. And I hope you've seen improvement at Tyler. We took your input to heart, and we've added staff and rangers at Tyler State Park. So I'm hoping you're seeing some improvement
Which
there.
I appreciate. We'll see this summer what happens, because I think the police from two municipalities are still prepared to be responding. And because that park gets closed down sometimes because so many people are there. I think we'll see what this summer brings, but I do appreciate the resources.
Yeah, and Lime Timber is quite different. We're really working with the timber industry, key to our state's economy. We've got to have working forest lands to maintain the timber industry, very important to the residents of that area. And the big timber investment management companies like Lime are a really important part of that. Lime's been a good partner on the easement we do hold with them. Sterling Run, they've been a phenomenal partner. They bring a credible management to the system. So I think for us, we see Lime as a very positive in the region. We work with all the big companies up there and all the small companies, work in conjunction with the Department of Ag and Harwood Development Council on that. We depend on the industry to manage the forest. We look at it ecologically. We need them to come in and manage different elements of the Commonwealth's forest, not just the ones we own. We're really responsible to maintain Penn's woods beyond our borders. So we take that seriously. Spruce Creek, I'll just be very brief on because it is in litigation. It used to be Coleraine State Park, and the Commonwealth is simply defending our property ownership up to the creek. And that's a really important creek for fishing. So we're defending a land ownership issue there in the courts. So with that being in litigation, probably all I should say, but that's the issue with Spruce Creek.
Okay, thank you. And then last, I want to turn to your $1 billion infrastructure backlog. Do you have any plans for enhancing current fees or services, maybe thinking about an out-of-state park entrance fee? That's been a discussion locally in my community, or other options like that, doing pilot programs, because if we have a $1 billion backlog, we have to figure out how to, work on that backlog, how to maintain all of the state parks that our Commonwealth is enjoying. And I know that I'm out of time, and so if you could please respond to me and let me know your thoughts on a pilot program, park entrance fees, parking fees, whatever those options are, because I think that we need to figure this out. Like, we don't have time, and I don't want to talk about this a year from now in a hearing, probably with 2 agencies where I have to decide who I'm going to talk to and who I'm not. And so I just wanted to thank you for your time, and I look forward to your response.
I'm happy to talk to you about our infrastructure. We are making progress. You'll be happy to know.
You can call us.
Yeah, we'll come over.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Chairwoman Fiedler.
Thank you so much, Chair Harris. Good morning. Still? No, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm State Rep Elizabeth Fiedler, proud to be chair of the new House Energy Committee. And already on our committee, and just as a resident, as a person, as a mom, I know one of the things that I often talk about is energy prices and demand, and the fact that demand is increasing. Electric bills are going up. Every article I read says that we should anticipate they will potentially continue to go up. So, Secretary Shirley, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about why demand is going up so much, and what can we do to help make sure that the people back home are protected from rising prices?
There's a number of things that are making demand increase right now. Everybody probably has a phone. I have 2 phones in my pocket right now. We have things that we plug in. We have things that we charge. There's increased development of data centers that folks are looking to locate in Pennsylvania. The demand for energy is increasing, and it's only going to continue to increase. We're seeing price issues because we have our laws that we have on the books right now have not kept up with that demand and new forms of energy that are potential. So one of the things that the governor has done recently is work with PJM. They recently have had some issues with their interconnection queue, approving projects. It takes a very long time for them to approve projects that come online that provide additional generation. So if you've ever taken an economics class, you know that if demand goes up and supply stays the same, the price goes up.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the work that the governor has done with PJM. I think that's been very helpful. I see the light's still green, so I'm just going to ask a second part of this, which is, I know there's been some talk in particular about an independent energy office, and I think we can all agree we want consumers not to face higher prices. However, there's already an energy programs office within DEP, and there's also a board, the Pennsylvania Energy Development Authority, that's largely staffed by people from that office. Could you just talk about that idea and the existing infrastructure we already have within state government, and whether there are changes or ways we could maximize what we already have to serve some of those needs?
Yeah, this is something that I think Dave, our Director of Energy, and I have had a lot of conversations about. You know, the State Energy Office is located at DEP. It's a pretty small office. We are looking at ways how we can expand that office. I know there are new demands on things that we want our energy office to do, and I think expanding that office actually wouldn't take that much effort. And we have plans in place now to start doing that. If it were independent, I don't know that they would have the same responsibility. So we have a number of responsibilities for that energy office. I'll let Dave talk about that really quickly.
Sure, thanks for the question. You know, ultimately, my office, our group of professionals, we're subject matter experts on energy, and you know, we stand ready to help folks with regards to energy acquisition, energy distribution, energy use questions. And we do that actually throughout the Commonwealth. We work with a lot of partners, a lot of our sibling agencies, DCNR, DGS, PennDOT, you know, DCED. Specifically, we have responsibilities together with the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. Also, PEMA, we respond as far as being a part of energy assurance and energy security within the state. So, you know, we develop plans and actions. We help essentially our community members, local governments, industry sectors by developing programs, delivering programs, but also doing studies. We're going to soon come out with a microgrid study on resiliency within communities, whereby we have critical facilities in communities and how to keep those up and running during times of power outages. So, you know, we develop all kinds of materials and information, and we work with a wide array of partners. And so ultimately, we feel like we're doing the job, and if there's more that we need to do, we would love to hear about it.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the chairman for the time.
Thank the gentlelady, Chairman Struzzi.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. I think that given the depth and breadth of your agencies, as you both stated, perhaps the chairman might consider next year having 2 different hearings or making this a day-long hearing, because I know I have a lot of questions, and I know a number of my members and probably the entire committee have a lot more questions that they would like to ask. So we will be submitting questions to you guys to follow up on. But a couple of points that I do want to note, and I do appreciate everything that both of you do. I think it has a tremendous impact on our Commonwealth, and so I think it's very important you know, that we continue to have these discussions about expediting processes and making sure that we are funding things properly. But getting to energy, and for Secretary Shirley, I know this is not a surprise to you, I want to talk about energy. But you had stated that the administration's priorities, or your 3 points of, I guess, goal setting, are to reduce emissions, grow jobs, and lower electrical rates. Correct. That's correct? So I think that we can all agree those are universal goals that we all share, but I guess we disagree on how to get there. And so in talking to a lot of businesses, a lot of global businesses that want to invest in Pennsylvania, what deters them is really 2 things. It's the policy that we have, or the policy that we continue to talk about in RGGI, in PRESS, in PACER, and it's the slowness of the permitting process. And I do appreciate the work you're doing, and I appreciate the lab tour that you hosted and outlined, you know, how you're trying to streamline things, get things moving, but we still have a long way to go. And so in talking with these industries, they want some level of certainty. And they're literally outside looking into Pennsylvania and saying, we have billions of dollars we want to invest in your Commonwealth, but this is what deters us. So as we continue to go down this path, I hope the governor realizes that every time he starts talking about these things that restrict business growth, he is literally putting up a blockade for energy investment in Pennsylvania. And it doesn't necessarily have to be access to the PJM. You know, a lot of these AI centers that we continue to hear and talk about, they're going to create their own natural gas plants in Pennsylvania just to fund their operations, or to supply energy to their operations. But again, they're deterred by the lack of clarity in where we're going with energy and environmental policy and the slowness of permits. And I mean, we hear this all the time. So my point is, I think the best thing that we can do is to get out of the way as far as government. I think that the administration, if they were to simply say, you know what, come on in, and they would. And go ahead, you can respond.
Well, I was going to say, I actually haven't heard that. I'm hearing exactly opposite from all of the data centers that have come in to talk with us. And there's a number of them that are looking at Pennsylvania, and they're very excited about the prospect of being able to use Pennsylvania's resources, whether it's like reopening TMI as the Crane Energy Center, or if it's like Homer City in your district where they're looking to build new natural gas. We've been working very closely through our regional permitting offices with those facilities to make sure that they do have an efficient permitting process. We're letting them know what the obligations are, and for a lot of them, we are encouraging them to use some of our pilot permitting processes that they weren't aware of, but we are making them aware of it when they do come in and talk to us.
Well, that was going to get to my question, actually, is do you prioritize and do you work with these entities to try and get them through the process quicker? So that response was appropriate. And so, I'll wrap it up because I know that, we won't have another hearing this afternoon. But I think it is important that we do have those dialogues, that we work together. I think our caucus would be more than happy to work with the administration to make sure we're doing what's right for Pennsylvania when it comes to energy, supporting what you're doing as far as permitting. As I said, I think you have made great strides, but we have a long way to go. Despite what you said, I do hear from entities that is their concern. The uncertainty of, are we going to be taxed if we put a new natural gas plant in Pennsylvania, and are we going to go down this path only to have our permits hold us up? So thank you for all being here. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the chairman. And thank you, secretaries, for being here with us this morning. I do want to put on the record a quick cursory review of the history of this committee. In 2021, when the Republicans controlled this committee, DCNR was actually not even invited to come and testify. Also, back in 2020, Republicans still controlled this committee, and it was on February 24th, actually, DCNR and the Department of Environmental Protection were here together. So this is not a new practice. This is something that has been going on for a very long time with this committee. But with that, we want to thank you all for being here, and we will break and adjourn this hearing. We'll be back 1:30. We'll be back, and we'll talk to the Department of Aging. Thank you, everybody.